And we're back. What's
Hello.
up? What's up?
I can be heard this week.
Yes, Claire
I'm
has a
happy.
working microphone. This is gonna be crazy.
It was really easy to fix, actually, but whatever. Whatever. And I almost
I
want
mean,
to
everything's easy
do,
when you know how to do it.
yeah, I almost want to do last week's episode over again. I don't even remember what happened, other than my mic wasn't working. So,
You did a
anyway,
lot of talking though. You said at the beginning you were gonna talk a lot, and it ended up being pretty much a conversation between you and April. And I did a little moderation, but it was.
no, you talked a lot last week. Anyway,
I don't think I
how are
talked that much.
you? How are you? Speaking of last week,
Yes,
how was your Thanksgiving? We were not together. I don't know when's the last time we weren't together for
it's been
Thanksgiving.
a while. Probably Korea. Probably the year I was in Korea,
Maybe. So, how was it?
which was 2008. It was great. It was great. We'll probably talk a minute about that when our guest comes on because he was there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and actually, it's been a while since we, since his family, his nuclear family, and our nuclear family were in the same place for a holiday.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I missed it all.
yeah, it was really cool. For me, the coolest thing was, and I was talking to Mom about this yesterday. They're saying your mic is quieter than mine. I don't know if you can turn up your mic volume at all,
I just
but
did. Is that better?
I have no idea.
It's also in my face, so I
That
can't.
is better. Yeah, yeah. Eat it. You got to eat it.
It's right here.
That's where you need it to be.
Well, I wanted it to sit on the table, though. I'm not gonna
Nah,
hold it.
you need it in your face.
Anyway, y'all can turn your speakers up.
I'm loud, and the sound effects are
Yes.
going to be loud.
Turn yours down.
No.
It'll be the same. Anyway, finish your story.
Anyway, so yeah, the coolest thing for me was seeing the next generation of cousins, like our generation's kids, interacting with each other. Brian's girls and Noah and Hannah's boys and Theo and stuff. Like, of course, Hannah's boys and Theo know each other already, but some of them had never seen each other before and stuff like that. And it was just really cool, really really cool.
Nice. I
Um,
hope we can somehow continue this tradition because I feel like the cousins should like be in charge of stuff now
right,
since all our parents are getting a little bit older.
we're middle aged.
We are
Yeah.
anyway. So I feel like yeah, I feel like we should definitely continue that and make sure the next generation of kids, just like you're saying, they actually know each other the way we knew each other. Like
Right,
growing
exactly.
up, my cousins were my best friends.
No,
Like I
seriously.
really, so
We
yeah,
were
I
we
want
were
that to
all
continue.
we were all in together. So and they legitimately like each other. You know what I'm saying?
Right,
Our kids, like they're not. For me at least, it doesn't seem like they're forced to be together. You know what I mean? That
right, right,
they're
right.
each other and they're excited about it. So the more we can facilitate, I agree with you. The more we can facilitate that, the better. How about you? How was your Thanksgiving?
My Thanksgiving was really, really nice too. This is my first Thanksgiving. This is my first Thanksgiving away from mom and dad. That can't be right.
Mhm.
There must have been one at some point, but
I
it's
don't
been a
think so.
while.
That was no. This is the first one.
I remember I think a few Thanksgivings back I took it off because I was just tired. I was like, I think I went on a cruise or something. Anyway, so I actually felt homesick, which I didn't expect.
Oh, okay,
Like I
interesting.
missed being with everybody at mom and dad's house, but we really, really, really had a nice time here. It was
Right.
relaxing, with April's family, and it's really a lot of fun when April and Kim get together because they're crazy.
April and Kim are hilarious.
So it's always fun and good times and laughs, and the food was delicious, of course. And it was a nice day. So I had a good Thanksgiving.
We had 4 mac and cheeses. We had 4 macaroni and
Four
cheeses.
different
Four
mattresses?
separate dishes made by 4 different people, so they were made differently.
That's ridiculous.
Completely unnecessary and
Ridiculous.
delicious. Also delicious because I had some of each of them. But yeah. Um. Anyway, so I see our guest getting antsy. Want to talk about Thanksgiving? So let's get him on here.
Well, let's welcome our viewers first of all.
Viewers, yes. How about that?
Welcome viewers. Welcome
It
back
might
to
be
the
important.
episode of. You know what we should also start saying? Welcome to Club PK,
Welcome to Club PK.
where
Like,
we
share, subscribe,
discuss.
tell your friends.
Yeah, where we discuss the secret lives of pastors' kids. They're not secret anymore because we're talking about it. But just as kind of a reminder why we're doing this, of course, Paul and I grew up as pastors' kids. We know a lot of pastors' kids, and the pastors' kids' experience is really unique.
Mhm.
And I think it's also really misunderstood too. So we just want to hear from the people who have the lived experience and, I think in some cases it will be a therapy session for them. In other cases, it'll just be interesting, or maybe it'll be all those things all the time.
Right.
But yeah, welcome to the show. Like and subscribe.
And let me say this too: we're interested in having an open,
there you go,
fruitful, fun conversation with our guests.
Yeah.
If that ends up being something that's not necessarily positive for a group of people, that's just kind of how the how the cookie crumbles. If it ends up being positive, then great. But we're not like trying to bash anybody. We're not trying to put anybody down. We just want to know the honest opinion of the honest experience of the people we have on, and we'll speak about our honest opinion as well. And we'll find that in some cases, organizations that we might perhaps hold to a high standards don't always meet, that standard. Which, of course, that's how every organization is.
I'm comfortable saying we'll discover quite a lot that organizations that we're a part to come nowhere near the standard. Like, I feel like you're being nice, right. But I feel like it's important to say this because there's a standard that we might talk about, but we don't actually live out. So
I suspect we're going to hear something about that kind of thing today with our guest, because Michael Nixon is not a punch puller by any means, and I suspect he got that from his dad.
Yeah,
these dudes will just say it, like they'll just say it. You know what I'm saying? People be beating around the bush and all this kind of stuff, but Michael just say it. And then Mike is also very, and you'll hear us call him Michael or Mike or perhaps Mick. See how it goes. We're cousins. We go back 30 plus years.
Yeah.
Michael's dad and our dad are brothers, so we're cousins. But Michael is extremely well read, extremely intelligent, extremely educated, very intelligent. But that's not my point. My point is that he knows a lot of stuff because he reads a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So he'll have very sort of firm opinions, but they're founded in research and reading and experience and all that kind of stuff. There's not a lot of just kind of off the cuff, I just feel like this. It's more like, here's what I read about it, and this is why I came to my conclusion.
Right.
So when he says stuff, it kind of has some weight to it. It kind of has some authority to it, in my opinion. So for me, it's very profound when he says what he says very, very openly, and when he doesn't pull punches, which he doesn't, because it's like, yo, you read that in 4 different sources. So it's not like, you know what I mean? I just feel like this thing. Nah, it's like, people. This is what the experts are saying.
Let's bring him on, because I actually have a question for him about that.
Sweet.
That I want to ask him. So let's bring on Michael.
Ladies and gentlemen, Michael Nixon.
Woohoo!
Yo. What's
How's
up?
it going? Thank you for giving us your time today.
No problem. Just if my boss comes barging in, just act like this is a business meeting. So we're good.
No problem. Yeah, we
definitely don't take for granted that you're at work right now and you gotta take some time away to talk to us. So we really appreciate it.
No doubt.
Here's the question that came to me as Paul was just speaking. First of all, you're on camera right now, so people don't know that you're like 7'5". Okay, you're a very large person.
Oh, that's funny.
And you have the huge beard. You're a black man. All the things, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you're also, just like Paul was saying, you know a lot. You speak with authority. But in my opinion, maybe I should ask other people this. You're not intimidating. Maybe you are intimidating to other people. I don't know. I feel like you're very actually soft-spoken and kind, and the things that you say it softly and in love, even though they're harsh truths sometimes. And so my question is, how did that happen? Where did you learn how to do that? Was it a reaction to being so tall? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, that's a really interesting question. Well, first of all, Paul and Claire, thanks for having me on. It's great to be with you all. Always good times when we have conversations and whatnot. So happy to be on the platform. And appreciate the kind words and affirming words. It means a lot coming from both of you. What I would say is this: I think what you said there at the end, definitely me being, large, not quite 7'5", 6'7", just to clarify. But I do think that, like, I definitely developed a pretty strong sense of getting used to how people react to my stature. And of course, as you said, being a black man, as I got older, developing, facial hair, that kind of a thing, maybe at times having a more serious looking face, just because, like, I just don't walk around with the smile on per se, but
Right.
once, as you said, once you get to know me, I'm pretty cool or whatever. So I think also probably definitely my mom, of course, you all know Sandria very well. Shout out to her. She she was definitely much more in tune with like talking to me about, okay, when you go out into the world, if you will, you have to remember that people are going to perceive you a certain way.
Mhm.
And Dad definitely talked to me about some of that as well, being a black man and just understanding like the interracial, intercultural dynamics of this country in particular. Um, and what I think I did get used to, and what helped me to navigate that, Claire, is that because of my stature, I was always perceived as older,
Mm.
particularly like before because of course, y'all know me forever. So you knew me when there wasn't a hair on my face. And so, but even so, like being, you know, 12, 13, 14, but being extremely tall, people perceiving me as older.
Mhm.
And also being one of the younger people in my grades because um, so when we were growing up, of course, y'all will remember my cousin Chris, who's my
Mhm.
cousin on my mom's side. Her younger sister Deidre's son, for a period of time, lived with us, and so
Right.
like our formative, like younger years and like younger part of elementary school, we were in the same class, and he's like about 8 months older than me, and so my mom wanted us to be in the same grade though, so she graded me
Uh,
up so that
okay.
I was typically always like the youngest person in my class. So that also contributed to it because I was 17 when I started college. And so
I didn't realize
um
that.
yeah, I was 17 when I
Okay.
graduated high school and started college. And so I think because of that, I got used to people expecting me to be older, also maybe being a little frightened by my stature. And so I maybe in some ways either compensated or overcompensated by kind of leading with a soft approach, just so that folks
Okay.
weren't also like whatever that bias they had wasn't confirmed by
Right.
like my tone or like the
Yeah.
words I used or that kind of a thing. So
Yeah.
yeah.
This is something
So,
I struggle with. I I struggle with it a lot at my last place of employment. Just
Oh, I'm sure.
being a
not saying all the things.
it was hard for me, and
Yeah.
like also
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
saying things with an attitude or like looking
Yeah.
at somebody like they're crazy. Like it was tough.
Yeah.
It was tough.
Yeah.
So I need to work on that.
So
Mhm.
Mike, Claire kind of assumed a thing, but I want to go back and ask the question. She said because she's talking about her own perspective. She doesn't find you intimidating. Of course,
Mhm.
we're older than you are, so we've known you since infancy. Like
Right.
and so for me, I look at you and I still think I want my sneakers on, and what I'm saying, like it's a pretty easy connection for me back to those
Dennis.
days. So I'm not I'm not thinking. Obviously, you're an adult and all that kind of stuff, but I'm not
Yeah,
like we're not intimidated by you, obviously.
for
But
sure.
but I guess the question would be, do you find that people might be intimidated, or you might find do they kind of give off that sort of vibe to you sometimes? And I see
Yeah.
you already said you kind of approach a situation deliberately trying to be softer, perhaps so as not to seem intimidating. But how much do you kind of deal with that sort of intimidation factor with people you don't already know?
Yeah. No, it's interesting you mentioned this because so leading up to Thanksgiving, and as you all said, we had an amazing time. Noah loved it, seeing her cousins, but also like seeing some of my cousins and uncles and stuff, like getting to know people more. She just, she was raving about it the whole drive back. And so
Nice.
a couple of days before we left for that trip, I actually hosted some people at my house, kind of like for a Friendsgiving. And so
Mm-hmm.
just some folks local. And I feel like part of why I did that actually is because, like, my dad having worked at Andrews and knowing that there are always students around that maybe can't go back home or whatever the case may be, we would always invite people to my parents' house who were just still in town for the holiday. And so, um, what I did was, I don't even know if I remember. Y'all probably remember that one. I don't even know if I can remember that. I'm sure it's funny. But so I had some friends of mine over. They're married now. Their names are Joe and Laya, and Laya was actually telling a story about because she was an undergrad at Andrews when I started working there, And
Okay.
she talked about how when she'd see me around sometimes she would feel kind of intimidated. Like she'd be like, "Oh, AVP Nixon," or like something like that. And thinking back, I remember she was like very timid and like would just like say hi and like walk away quickly. I'd just be like, what's wrong with her? But then she said, once we started to get to know each other like as friends, because Joe, who she married, is actually a little closer to me in age, we became friends and started interacting with me in different settings. And was just like, oh man, I would have never known just like how down to earth, how laid back, how cool you are, had I not known you like in this particular setting. And
Right.
so I think it's context specific. So like during
Right.
the work there, like being a VP and like sometimes I was teaching. I know you all both were professors, either are teaching or were teaching and that kind of thing. That teacher-student relationship can add to that dynamic,
Yeah.
even if you're not trying to, so the context matters, I think. The other thing I say as far as like helping with how I learned to navigate that is that I definitely observed people dealing with that in relation to my father.
Right.
He's not quite as tall as me, but he's tall. I mean,
Big
all
dude.
of our parents, have some size, and
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
he definitely he probably has a bit more of a scowl than I do. But as you all know, he has the loudest laugh in the family by far.
Right. For sure.
I mean, it's just like that laugh will start an earthquake, and so so seeing like and having classmates, for example, like come to me because he was a chaplain while I was a student at Andrews and be like, oh, yo, like your dad seems kind of, and I just be like, yo, my dad's cool. Like just go talk to him.
Right.
That's that little fake New York back in the day stuff. Like he's not, he's harmless kind of a thing.
Right.
And so having that context of seeing people interact with him and asking me questions about him also contributed to me, I'd say, like having that in the back of my mind that, yeah, when I walk in a room, people, there's that old saying, people don't see the world as it is, they see the world as they are. And so,
Right.
whatever interactions they've had with someone who looks somewhat like me is going to inform what they think or maybe something they heard. So you just take all that into account as you get to know them.
Yeah, you're more mature than I am. I'm realizing that as I'm hearing you speak. It might not even be close. So,
hey, now I'll be honest. It's as you know, it's an imperfect I mean, I could tell you stories about that not going very well because, of course, being in the DEI space as I was leading that at Andrews for 6 years. Yeah, there's all kinds of stories we could dive into where I did not lean into the best parts of me, but hey, we take it one day at a time.
Yep,
Yeah,
exactly.
we're all on a journey.
Yeah.
So we're gonna talk a little bit more about. We'll mention your dad more than your mom today because just the context of our conversations about being a pastor's kid, and of course your father is the pastor, not your mother.
Mm-hmm.
With that being said, I want to just make sure we shout out your mom because Andrea Nixon is a powerhouse, like a superstar. She's incredible, just super accomplished and learned and educated and sweet and funny and all the things.
Yeah,
and gorgeous, like everything. So we want to make sure
that's salmon.
Oh my gosh, she can cook. I mean, all the things, like literally all the things. So it's like we just want to make sure we give her a minute or two of airtime.
Yeah, and she's still married to my father, which
is amazing.
Let's round of applause right now.
Super patient, right?
It's like extra stars in the crown, dog. It's wild. Yeah, it's crazy.
That's funny.
Oh man, but so let's talk about being a PK because you're actually, let me just ask the question rather than making a statement because you probably even correct what I'm getting ready to say. Because your dad was at one place for a really long time, right? Your dad was chaplain at Andrews for 20 years or something like that.
Yeah.
So because of that, you didn't move around quite as much as perhaps we did.
Yeah.
How old were you when you guys got there?
Well, so I was going into the 6th grade when we moved to Andrews. That's kind of how I remember it. That's the easiest way to remember it. So I was like, 12, 13 range or so. I'd say we probably moved a lot more prior to that. So, of course, I was born in upstate New York, Poughkeepsie. So he was pastoring in the Hudson Valley at that time. I don't remember too much about that. Most of my earliest memories We moved from there to Southern California. So he's in Southeastern California Conference. Um, so and that's where Camille was born, my younger sister. She was born there in 94, the 94 range or so. Yeah, because she just turned 30. So yeah, 94.
Wow, just go ahead and tell all her
Camille
business.
You old, Camille. Deal with it, Camille. You old, but
we were talking about that last week because
yeah,
your mom was like telling her something about pouring some juice, and she was like, "Mom, I'm 30, I can handle."
Yeah,
we're like, "Well, Camille is 30. What?"
That's insane for sure. You're talking about seeing people when they're young. It's the same way y'all probably see me. That's how I see her, obviously.
Right.
You guys are pretty about 7 years apart. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so SoCal, then we moved to Maryland, which I think we may have been in Maryland around part of the same amount of time, maybe or maybe not, because I know
I think we were in Maryland. Yeah, I think we were in Maryland because we were there for like
96,
a year and a half.
97.
Yeah.
I think we were there when you guys got there and we left shortly after or something like that.
Exactly. It was something like that, yeah. And so we were probably there the shortest amount of time because we got there when I was in 3rd grade. And like I said, we moved to Camille just text me, you said tell you about how old I was. Yes, I did. So yeah, we moved from there to Andrews when I was going into 6th grade. And honestly, it's funny, and Dad would tell you probably better than me, I really did not want to go to Andrews. I really didn't know anything about it other than he went to seminary there. I knew Mom went to nursing school there or whatever. She had never really talked about Andrews, which was kind of telling to me. So it was just sort of like, it seems like a weird place, but actually it's interesting what ended up, I was mad about this, but my dad took this as a sign. He was considering going there, and at the time in Maryland, I was involved with this the National Geography bee, and so I was like studying for one of the things for that, and I was reading about. I just wanted to look up like who was like I think it was like the first winner of it, and as I looked that up, the person who was the first winner was actually a graduate of Andrews.
Okay,
and I was telling Dad about that. And he was like, he had been, I guess, praying for like a sign as to whether or not we should go. And around that same time, I came to him and said, hey, I know you have this job opportunity at Andrews, but this guy was the first person who wanted to be. So yeah, we ended up going there. And honestly, it really, it changed the trajectory of all of our lives, I would say. I, of course, would later end up going back there to be a VP. Dad was there for, I think it was about 15 years. He was chaplain from 98 to 2013 or so, or 2012. And, or no, 98 to like 2016, I want to say. Something like that. So almost 20 years.
Almost 20 years, yeah.
Yeah, but yes, we were there the longest for sure, but we had moved. Man, I want to say prior to that, because we moved sometimes within states, we probably moved around like 12, 13 times, like to different houses and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Until we got there. And then after renting a couple of houses, they ended up, finally like buying a house again. They had owned property in Cali, but then when it became clear, like, all right, we're going to be here for a bit, that's when they built the house out here. So yeah, those were all the moves.
It's also interesting how, go ahead, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I'm about to say something that might take us off this, so go ahead.
We don't have to stay on this.
You have a bit of a different dynamic because you're a pastor's kid, but also you went to the school, or you were at least on the same campus where your dad was the chaplain.
Yeah.
And so you have like an added element that we didn't necessarily have. So what are some perks that you feel you experience because of that? And then also what are some things that you experience that you didn't particularly enjoy because of that dynamic?
That's a great question. I think probably the closest thing you all would have had to experiencing that was like when Uncle John maybe was like at AUC, or like when he was pastor at Collegedale and Oakwood. It was just kind of like a similar dynamic. But I'd say, so things I enjoyed, I think when I was younger, I probably enjoyed it more because, you know, I kind of was naturally used to being around folks who were a little bit older than me. Like I said, just because I was like youngest in my class. And so, but when, moving into like being older in elementary school and high school, being around my pops, he'd obviously be at the university for different stuff. And so I'd get to interact with, older college kids and stuff like that. And I actually really enjoyed that.
Mm.
Um, I also enjoyed, so like obviously they'd have like a lot of potlucks or dinners at their house, or we'd go to other folks' house. And um, I actually would find myself more often than not, like sitting at the table where my dad would be with like, Dr. Walter Douglas, who's like an OG of the seminary, or like Dr. Jones or Dr. Hoylett, who was a VP at Andrews, and just like kind of hear them talking about what the different random stuff was happening throughout that past week. Jones was at the seminary with Douglas, Hoylett and my dad being on the university side. And so I was just fascinated by that stuff for whatever reason. Of course, not knowing that, years later I'd end up working at Andrews and being able to think back on some of those conversations. But I really enjoyed just kind of hearing what was happening.
I thought you were going to say something about the potluck food, but okay.
I mean, yeah, the food. I mean, the food's a given. Like, that goes
Well,
without saying.
not always though. I mean, potlucks are hit or miss
Yeah.
sometimes.
Well, I mean, when we were at our house,
at your house,
Right.
yeah,
food was slamming. Food was slamming for sure. Stuff I didn't enjoy. I think that as I got older, I'm thinking about like when I was a student there at Andrews now while he was chaplain. Um, I didn't always enjoy people kind of putting me in a box per se. So like
Yeah.
I would get questions a lot about, if I was going to be pastor or like if I was going to pursue pastoral ministry, that kind of a thing. And the thing that, dad was always great about even growing up was he would just always say like, this is not the family business. Like this is the calling. And so um, if you don't feel the specific individual call to this, then don't just get caught up in like what I'm doing or what you see your uncle doing.
I
Or,
love that.
of course, as I got older and like, I had cousins who became ministers and stuff too. It's like, yeah, I mean, you could easily fall into it because you know this well. Because like the other part of growing up at Andrews is that, you know, I didn't realize this till afterwards, but I know like so many generations of seminarians. And
Right.
so a lot of those people are pastors now. So you go somewhere and it's like, oh yeah, I remember you were a student back in '02 when I was in high school or something like that. So I just got an intimate level of knowledge around how all that stuff works. And so he just always encouraged me like, yeah, don't just do it because you're familiar with it. Only do it if you're called to it. And so I never felt that specific call. Praise the Lord. So and so but so that would be kind of annoying at times, like people just assuming like, all right, you're just gonna, you know, join in with the family legacy, if you will, and trying to, be intentional about sort of finding my own voice, my own lane, and being passionate about things that are happening in the church, but trying to create lanes and avenues where people understand that you don't have to be a minister, a pastoral minister, um, to engage in those conversations and those topics. And so I'd find other avenues like through writing and things of that nature. And then from time to time, getting asked to speak or things of that nature, which, some of those things intersect with pastoral ministry, but it's not the specific call. And so um, that's probably how I navigated sort of, you know, because it could feel at times you're in that shadow in
Yeah.
a sense.
Yeah.
I felt that some when I was a student. And then even going back to work there, um, a lot of the conversations I was involved in were conversations that dad was involved in,
Right.
for better or worse. And so um, being comfortable in my own skin, I think took some work, but ultimately I think got there.
Nice.
So I love the sort of comment or the training from your dad, this is not the family business. You know what I mean? This is not, don't just do this because I'm not like going to hand you the reins and you're the next guy. Nah, you got to find your own calling kind of thing. I love that. And I'm wondering how much we're going to hear a similar report from people as we continue this podcast. We've talked to a couple people that, and of course, one of our guests was our brother and another one was April. And we know John's experience a little bit. And John is, of course, son of my dad, who's your dad's brother. So it kind of has a similar approach, right? This is not, it's not you do it next because I'm doing it. That's not what this is. But I'm wondering how sort of frequent that's going to be, that testimony is going to be, as opposed to people saying, this is the family business, right? Following your dad's footsteps, that kind of thing. And we know we hear some of that from church members. We definitely hear some of it like, hey, you're just like your dad. Are you also going to be like your dad in this other way?
Yeah.
Right.
Which can be frustrating. But again, for you, you were kind of steered away from it by a stronger influence inside your house as opposed to the outside influence. So that's great. I love that. Let's juice it up a little bit.
Let's do it.
So let's talk about your marriage.
Let's do it.
That's a weird way to transition. Okay, go ahead.
So I want to talk about the idea of being married to a pastor when you're the man and they're not. Like, you're obviously not a pastor's wife. You were a pastor's husband. For a period of time. So what was that like? I mean, how, I don't know if there's a good way to ask the question, but how weird was that? Like, was it strange to be like?
Can I edit that question?
Sure.
So Michael, you grew up seeing how your mother handled being a pastor's wife.
Right.
Yeah.
Did any of that influence how you? I don't know if the word "handles" is a good word, but I'm going to use it because I can't think of anything else. Navigated being a pastor's husband.
Sure. I love that edit. That's a great addition to that. So I'll first say it was a little bit weird. Not because not internally, because I was always very huge prominent, supporter of women in ministry. Always has been. That comes from, definitely Pop's influence for sure.
And also accurate reading of the text.
an accurate reading of the text. And then also I think having, again, grown up around the seminary, being, blessed by just amazing women of God, ministers, pastors that were there getting trained. I probably intersected with most of them at some point if they were there during that time frame. So I was given a good context for that just from growing up, at Andrews, being at the seminary, dad at New Life, because of course he pastored the campus fellowship there and was always intentional about having women on his staff, involved, engaged. And so up front, pastoring, this and that. So that was definitely a huge breeding ground for that. As far as mom, I think what I learned from her is, mom, and y'all know her pretty well, she was really never going to get like forced into any particular role at the church.
Right.
And so, like I remember when we were in Southern California, and she hates when I bring this up, but I think, she tried this thing for a little bit where they wanted her to be in like the church choir. I think we were at Valley Fellowship. They wanted her to be in the church choir or whatever. And she did like a little solo, and it's funny the things you remember. I remember her doing that solo, and it was terrible.
I was about to say, does Sandria sing? I don't remember.
No, she does not. She does not. She's one of the few members of our family who doesn't sing, and so she does not have that gift. And so, but to her credit, she recognized it and was like, "Yo, I appreciate y'all trying to include me in the choir, but." I'm gonna assume my position and do my thing. And so she would get involved here or there, but she didn't need like a church office or being, some leadership position. That wasn't, her vibe. And so I certainly, I think, learned from that example. So Tatiana, when she started pastoring, in New Jersey Conference, which is a state conference, she was actually the first woman that they hired, full time to be a pastor for that conference. And so I think certainly the different weirdness of navigating that was certainly more on her than it was for me. I'd say the only couple times we we would laugh about this, we had these interesting moments where, like, so in that conference they would always have a Christmas party, and there's a portion of that party where the pastors like spouses, and they started using the word spouses when I showed up, because before that it was the pastor's wife,
right.
and then the pastors would go squad up, and so I remember, you know, they would do like a gift exchange thing, and so that year they handed me this gift bag, and it was like, you know, Bath and Body Works. There was a bathrobe in there, which
a pink bathrobe.
Yeah, it was a color. It was like a pink bathrobe, which wasn't going to fit. Now this is the biggest size we could find, you know. And we're basically just like, oh yeah, you can give this to your wife, like, you know, she'll enjoy this. And so it was like, okay, I had a good laugh about it. You know, I have a good sense of humor, but it was one of those things where it was like, okay, this is, yeah, it definitely did not fit. Like just like the OJ glove, it did not.
So wait, hold on. Let me ask you. So it was a gift specifically for you, or it was like a random gift exchange, like a Secret Santa, like a white elephant?
I think it was probably more that, or it was just more like everybody. I think whoever was the coordinator of like the pastor spouses thing, she just bought gift bags for all the wives, right? Exactly. And then I just got a bag, so I gave that to Tasi. So
it was anonymous, pretty much.
Yeah. So it was. I think it was interesting for sure. I think it was also interesting sort of navigating. So like, just to be candid, the first church that she was there as an associate pastor, and we did not have a good experience with him, with her being under his leadership. It just did not go well. The dude was actually kind of creepy, not really directly towards her, but there was some weird stuff that happened at the church. And so they actually ended up splitting the district. So there was a main church, and then there was another church, which was Princeton SDA Church, where we ended up, where it was kind of like the afterthought, to be honest. And so when some static happened, they moved us to Princeton full time, and I think definitely had a better experience there with the folk there. Not everybody was supportive before we got there. Some people left, which I think honestly was a blessing in disguise, because it's better to have someone who doesn't agree leave than to have to deal with that. But the people, you know, who stayed were super supportive. We saw some growth there for sure. One of the major projects that she led was like renovating the sanctuary there, so they have a beautiful sanctuary now. And so yeah, it was an interesting, you know, few years for sure.
So it's we gotta pay some bills. Let's come back to this, because I have a couple follow-up questions. I don't want to talk too much about the actual marriage, but I do want to talk about some sort of.
We can go into it. This is, you know, we don't pull punches. So
we should have started with
questions you want to ask.
I know, right? But, well, I am going to ask what I want to ask, but I want to get into how you were treated when things happen, as opposed to why things happen. That's not really.
I got you. Yeah, okay. For sure.
So we'll get to that in just a second. Let's take a quick break. Listen to one of our sponsors, and then we'll come right back with Michael. Everybody hang on.
Right, cool.
This episode of Club PK is brought to you by Jesus Paid It All Bail Bonds, the first bail bonds company to focus exclusively on Christian crimes.
Need help because your mother was arrested for gossiping?
Have a cousin who's facing charges on 4 counts of taking change out of the offering plate?
Is your pastor behind bars for consistently preaching for over an hour and a half and saying absolutely nothing?
Then call Jesus Paid It All Bail Bonds. Our bail bondsmen, that's right, they're all men and heads of their households, will hear your case and judge if your cause is worthy of their support.
Mention Club PK, that's CLUB-PK, at the front vestibule and get exclusive access to the head bail bondsman, who has a direct line to the throne of grace if you bring a bulletin from a verified church service that took place within the last 30 days.
That's right. Mention Club PK, that's CLUB PK, at the front vestibule and get exclusive access to the head bail bondsman who has a direct line to the throne of grace if you bring a bulletin from a verified church service that took place within the last 30 days.
Jesus paid it all bail bonds. 30 pieces of silver for your freedom.
And we're back. Really grateful to our sponsors. It's just really interesting. You know, we're looking for these very unique sponsors. You know what I mean? With a very specific lane. We want these people to kind of travel in, and we're finding these really interesting sponsors. But who would have known? Who would have thought there'd be a Christian bail bonds company? You know what I mean?
And it's necessary. Somebody really found their niche. You know what I'm saying? So
gotta have it. Gotta have it. Some of these people need to be locked up. Or actually set free because Jesus paid it all.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So we're talking about sort of the effects of your experience and how the church treated you in your experience. And of course, you know, we're using the past tense, we're married because now you're divorced. And I'm wondering how, okay, let me say this as a kind of a preface. I know for sure from my experience and from my observation, our church does not do certain things well, right?
Yeah.
In fact, there are some things that our church does really, really poorly. One of the things I think we do poorly is relate to people who are not married. Whether that is you're single or you were married or you're widowed or divorced, whatever it is. If you're not currently married, our church has a hard time with that population. And three of us represent sort of three different orientations to marriage right now, right? I'm currently married. Claire's never been married. And Michael, you were once married and not anymore. So I'm kind of wondering, how has being divorced, how has your experience changed maybe?
Sure.
How people treated you differently? I'm not even sure what the question is, but you get what I'm after.
How did, I'll just read, we have this written. How
do
did
we have
being, we do. How did being a PK in the community where your dad was still working affect how you processed your divorce, or affect how other people responded to you as you were going through your divorce?
That's a great question. So I'd probably say it this way, because I was in the community both that I was a PK in and that I was currently working in, because I was currently working at Andrews still as a VP at the time when I was going through my divorce. And so I'd probably say a couple things. So, you know, I went through it. Well, the process started in 2020, like post-pandemic, and ended up finalizing like June of 2021. So like during that initial period of time when things were getting started, you know, my now ex and I had conversations and, you know, made that decision. And so the first step was kind of like starting to let people know. And what I can say is, you know, had conversations. So the first people I had a conversation with were my parents to let them know this was going to be happening. And they couldn't have been more supportive. They obviously, you know, were heartbroken that it was going to be happening. But we're just, I mean, one of the first questions they asked me, well, you know, well, y'all know my mom. So she asked a couple of questions, but after we got past those,
those initial mom questions, right?
After we got past some of those, you know, they both just asked me, you know, how can we support? What can we do?
Right.
You know, what would you like us to do? How can we best be there for you? You know, that kind of thing. So then I also
here real quick, Nick. So another thing I just want to highlight that I think this is just so valuable and a positive experience that you were just talking about now and that we have as well is our parents have always prioritized our family over church politics.
Yeah.
Right? That's always been the case for us. And I know that's not the case for every pastor's family out there, but for us, it's always been, mom and dad have always been, what do you need?
Yeah.
And we'll figure out the church thing.
Absolutely.
Or not.
or not, right?
Exactly.
But what do you need from us as your parents? And my dad has actually chastised me for going to someone else for help. He's actually said to me, "Call me. I'm your father. Let me help you with this trouble you're going through." And I'm like, "Well, you got your work." He's like, "Forget about that.
Yeah,
I'm your dad." You know what I'm saying? So like,
yeah.
So I love that. And
Mm-hmm.
of course I expect that from your parents because obviously I know them. But I just love that was their response. I just want to highlight that very positive. My
support
son.
system.
Yeah,
You
no,
know what I mean?
absolutely. I totally agree. I can affirm that. I'd also say so. Another critical conversation I had not too long after that was with the president of Andrews at the time, Dr. Luxton, and the provost at the time, Dr. Arthur. So I reached out to them and with an unusual request, because of course the campus was mostly shut down at that point.
Right.
And I said to them, like, hey, I need to share something with you all, but I don't want to do it on Zoom. Like, I get the social distancing stuff. So can we, is it okay if we do this? And I was like, I'm not leaving or anything like that. Like, I didn't want them to think that like I was quitting, but
not yet anyway.
yeah, exactly. Depending on how they reacted,
right.
I wanted to speak with them. And so we met in Dr. Luxton's office. She had all the windows open and we were in like three corners of the room.
The good old days.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I let them know, hey, this is what's happening. I'm going to be getting a divorce. And I really didn't know I had a good relationship with them at the time. I felt super supported by them. I never had any bad interactions with them, but I just didn't really know how they were going to react. I didn't exactly know. And similar to my parents, they couldn't have been more supportive. They couldn't have been more caring, loving, protective. I mean, some of the things Dr. Luxton said was, we're going to do the best we can to protect you in this. They're like, we don't need to know the details. She was like, I know for a fact that there's, nothing on your end that we need to worry about as it relates to this. Like we know your character, we know your heart. Like, don't worry. Like you're covered. And it just, I just really appreciated that. I really, it helped. It was like, okay, that was like kind of another hurdle crossed. And so, so those are on the positive side. And then just the one other person I'll mention on the positive side is my really close friend, Jose Bourget, who so he worked with my dad as a chaplain and still is the head chaplain at Andrews. And so we were co-workers as well. He's been through a divorce. They're in that community. He got remarried on the other side of that. And so he's been through it all. And so, had a critical conversation with him because I really didn't even know how to navigate the process. Like, I never even thought about that. And so he was really instrumental in just helping me navigate all the logistics of it, talking me through, hey, this is what's going to happen. Like when people ask you questions about it, this is how I navigated it. Like, all those different things. And so had lots of really, positive support. I know my sister's watching. I mean, my sister, y'all know Camille. I mean, she's just rock solid. Like, she was the same as my parents. Like, whatever you need, we got you. Like, we're going to be good. Like, how can we best support you? How can we support Noah? Of course, at that time, we didn't make Noah aware of things until a little bit later. So on the flip side, I'll say, I think the main thing that our church doesn't handle well is really more how we gossip about these kinds of things.
Jesus.
And it's just like, that happens outside the church, I'm sure as well. But I think there's a unique, since we're talking in this context, there's just a unique sickness I think we have rooted around that. And to be fair, as I was sort of navigating through, the rumor mill and, the word kind of getting out and, people hearing whatever they're hearing. And so, of course, I really appreciated in that time, like hearing from like family, like I know like family reached out, like close friends that I'm really like closely connected with that I hadn't really spoken to about anything yet, because I really didn't talk to anybody other than the people I just mentioned. I didn't really say anything as we were leading up to this particular point. And so I think during that period of time, I I actually appreciated the fact that the pandemic was happening on
That was
some
one of my
level.
questions.
And I know,
You
and I
didn't have
know,
to interact.
that was the horrible. That was just one of the most horrible times we all went through collectively.
Yeah.
But the component of it where, you know, I could have a mask on. I was probably the happiest person in the world to have a mask on.
Right.
Not having like people enclosed in my office having meetings, social distancing, because like we opened our campus back up, but all the protocols were in place. And
Right.
so I felt like that gave me time to navigate all of that without people being in my face, which I think is something I really needed for sure.
Mhm.
And I think some really intense therapy obviously really helps. So, I'm a big proponent of, Jesus and therapy. So like for mental health is just super important. So just being able to have someone where I could just like show up and just be raw and say like exactly how I felt about everything, like on a weekly basis, and just saying,
Mhm.
this is what's frustrating about this, and getting that kind of counsel. Having, the people I mentioned, friends in my corner, family that I could really lean on, and during those periods of time was helpful, while the church did the thing that it does, which is gossip and rumor about stuff. And I'll be honest, like one of the things that I think actually frustrated me, just in addition to things being speculated about, to be really candid with you, is how nasty some people were being in relation to my ex.
Unbelievable.
Because her and I had whatever conversations we needed to have, made peace with it, did what we had to do as far as making sure we did what was best for our daughter, which is
Yeah.
to co-parent her and to she's an amazing mom to our daughter, and we have a great co-parenting relationship, and so all that's good. And so I couldn't understand why, if I was doing whatever needed to be done to move forward and to make peace with the situation, why unrelated, disconnected people had all kinds of opinions and things to say about her, and some about me. Because I mean, there were people that stirred up some wild false rumors about me as well in the process. And it was just like, if we're doing what we need to do and we're the ones who are actually connected and in the situation, why do you have so much to say?
Right.
It was kind of the thing. So, it's one of those things where, you live and you learn. And what I always try to say to people, because there's this spiritual dynamic of it too, where, people really get caught up in some really, I think, negative theology around how they think about relationships and divorce, and, oh, God hates divorce and this and that. And it's like, oh yeah, well, God also hates the things that cause divorce. He doesn't just hate that, and so there are lots of things that God, doesn't, agree with. But at the end of the day, till death do us part, sometimes relationships die. And that death isn't always a physical death. And that God's grace is sufficient for everyone who's involved, and there's life on the other side of it. And so, we're both navigating that in our different ways. My ex is happily remarried. She got married earlier this year. And I'm not married, praise the Lord, but that may happen at some point. But I'm doing great, and I think I'm really leaning into the importance of just continuing to be a whole person, and knowing that I'm a whole person all by myself, and navigating relationships in the future from that posture is going to be much better than sort of the youthful pressure we sometimes feel to latch on to someone and get married, and be chained to one another, if you will.
I was talking to Dad. I think it was Dad about something related to this recently, because I kind of changed my tune about marriage at some point in my adult life, and my dad wasn't aware of it. And I made a comment to him, something like, when I became, at some point in my probably late 20s or early 30s, I realized marriage is something I had to do. I was like, I don't have to do that. And then I was like, okay, great. Like, I don't know. It just
like freeing almost.
Yeah. Like but I think it speaks to, and it's interesting because my parents I grew up around really, really strong, happily married people.
Oh yeah.
Like a lot of them. And so all the examples that were in my face were really good examples. But then I was still like, nah, y'all got that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I'm looking at the clock. We gotta get you out of here, but I have so many follow-up questions. Can we do this again?
Let's do it. Yeah.
I
have a lot more to say too. So yeah.
Good. Yeah, I have a lot of questions, and I'm really interested in the whole really how the church is treating you as a single person again, or a divorced person, or whatever it is. I'm really interested in that. Yeah. I'm also interested in what you wish the church would do. We don't have time for that for sure, but I want to get into some of that. You're also, John said you're a great interviewer. You're also, let me just say this with a little bit of bragging, because we're family. You're probably one of the most eligible bachelors in the United States right now. I mean,
I don't know what people are doing.
Like literally the definition of tall, dark, and handsome. I mean, seriously.
Right. Educated, smart.
Michael Nixon. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Gainfully employed. I mean, terminal degree. Great dad. Like all these stuff. So I'm really interested in how that's working for you and how much rhythm you're getting. But
I'm gonna just clip that and put it on my dating profile or something.
There you go. There it is. That's it right there. So we'll talk about getting you back on here. But we'll let you go.
Sure.
We know you got stuff to do. You're at work.
For sure.
So, but we really appreciate your time, and everybody, you want to just stay tuned with us, because we're coming back with Michael, man. It's gonna be. It might be 2 weeks. It might be a month, who knows? But it'll be soon.
Yeah.
We'll get back on here.
Yeah. For sure. Definitely want to jump back on. Yeah, thanks for having me. This is a great conversation, a great platform. And I'm looking forward not just to being back on, but hearing some of the other guests you're going to have on. So appreciate y'all having me on.
We'll try to convince Camille to join you next time too.
Yeah, I'll twist her arm a little bit. We'll see what I can do.
Thank you, Michael.
All right, y'all.
Yeah.
Wow, that was great.
Yeah, that was fantastic.
Now that I know he's okay with answering any questions, next time I'm not giving him any softballs. Like, I want to really dig deep.
Well, I said, and Uncle Tim's got something to say. I'll put it on the screen here in just a second. I said we want to ask questions about the response to your situation, not about why what happened. But he said, ask whatever you want. So maybe we'll ask a little bit about why. I don't want this to turn into this isn't a gossip rag, right? But
not at all. But I think it's important that we talk about, and this is unrelated to being a PK actually, but I do still think it's important that we talk about areas where the church can do better.
Yeah.
As like a community. Like, if you're really a community.
I don't know that it is unrelated though. I think we have a unique point of view on
true.
Church operations. We're behind the scenes from when we're Mike was talking about sitting at the table with his dad when he was a little kid and listening to these super highly educated, very intelligent, like-minded Christian men or people, because it's not always men, right? To talk about this thing. And that absolutely helps us to develop into more conscientious and thoughtful and all that kind of stuff. That's one of the advantages, I would say. Just sitting at the table with Uncle Tim. We did the same thing with Dad. John and I sit at the table with Dad, and we're little kids and stuff, and you two were,
I learned so much just from Dad and Uncle Greg talking to each
other.
In
the room.
Just being in the room. I learned a lot.
Not contributing to the conversation, just sitting there listening.
Just listening, yeah.
So
and as Michael was talking, I was thinking too about how many opportunities the Holy Spirit gives us as a church community to love each other better, and how many times we just drop the ball. I mean, opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. The Lord is literally trying to say, hey, here's a hurting member of your community. No matter what the reason is, here's a hurting member of your community. What are you going to do about it? And we just keep dropping the ball. I'm just like, guys, we can do better than this. We can do better than this.
We can do better. Here's what Uncle Tim has to say. He says the church in Christianity is set up and functions for couples and families, while the greatest Christians were single men: Jesus, John the Baptist, and the Apostle Paul. Yep, so there's absolutely space for singleness, and Paul talks about it in at least one of his books, maybe two. I don't know exactly where they are, but they're in the New Testament somewhere. Talks about how it's better to be single in some cases because you can devote yourself entirely to
more fully to.
Or more fully to thinking, instead of having to split because if you're married, you have a very direct, real responsibility that's separate from working for God in some ways, right? Or some would say that they're the same thing, but my point is there's value in singleness, but our church doesn't always treat it that way.
Yeah.
This might be an overstatement. I thought about this before we got on. Maybe I'll write it down so I can have Michael's response to what I'm about to say. I'm going to ask a question. I'm typing it as I'm saying it. There we go.
Do we overemphasize being married? My answer to that,
being married. Do we treat marriage as though it's more important than it actually is? More necessary, more required,
more holy.
More holy, huh?
So I think, and I want to answer this. I know our time is up.
But I guess it's gone. We can sit on
person, like I have thoughts as a single person, because I've started to be a lot more vocal about my decision to be single, and the different responses that I get just tells me a lot. And I felt it before, but now I'm hearing it because I'm more vocal now too. And I 100% believe that God created marriage
right
in the beginning of time. But I also believe that things have changed quite a bit. Most people don't get married, like just statistically. And most people, when they get married, get divorced, just statistically.
Right.
So why are we
percentage-wise? Most people are single.
Yeah, most people are single. So are single people less like, to me, that logically doesn't make sense, that I'm less holy or I'm less a child of God or my spiritual walk is less important or it's less valid or it's not as strong as someone else's who is married. And I do think being in a marriage, you can learn quite a lot spiritually, but I don't think the Lord is bound by a marriage relationship to teach me things as a single person.
Right.
In other words, there are things that married people are going to learn just because they're married. But does that mean I'm not going to learn those things just because I'm not married? God can teach me whatever he wants, however he wants to teach it.
Right. God doesn't limit it.
Exactly. Sometimes it feels like married people in particular, sometimes it feels like married people, one of the ways they look down on single people is, oh, she's not going to understand this. She's not going to get this. I'm like, where'd you get that from?
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, we'll ask it again in another episode.
Yeah. Wow, that was fun.
That was great. Thank you so much to Michael. Michael,
appreciate it.
Yeah, he'll be back for sure.
We got to get him on. Yeah, we have our next guest lined up, right? So maybe 2 episodes out.
We do. Well, we're not going to say now because we haven't talked to Michael, but we'll have him back at some point, and maybe he'll be a recurring guest. Who knows?
Maybe it'll be first show in January. Who knows? Mm-hmm. But we'll get it on there for sure.
The point is, thank you everybody for tuning in, for listening.
For listening, we appreciate it. We're gonna run another quick commercial, and then we're gonna get out of your way.
See you next time.
you.